Did you know that the light in your home started with a pile of black rock? It's true. Long before our modern world of instant power, there was coal. People, mostly forgotten now, saw a revolution in that rock. They imagined a world lit not by candles or gas lamps, but by a steady, brilliant glow. This is the story of how they built that world, one shovelful of coal at a time. It's a tale not just of machines, but of human ingenuity and relentless determination. A chapter of our history that laid the foundation for how we live today, yet one we rarely pause to remember. We often think of the electrical age as a sudden flash of genius, a single light bulb, a famous inventor. But the reality is more humble and more sprawling. It began in soot-stained cities of the 1800s, a time of great change and even greater ambition. Men and women were building a new industrial world, and that world was hungry. It needed power. It needed a force that could run all night and drive the giant looms and lathes of 1,000 factories. The answer was buried beneath their feet, waiting to be unlocked with fire and water. These first power stations weren't colossal monuments. They were modest brick buildings tucked in yards and alleys, noisy, grimy, and utterly miraculous. Inside, roaring fires turned water into steam that pushed pistons and spun turbines. The story truly takes root in the 1880s. In cities like London and New York, the demand for light was exploding. One of the very first central power stations was the Holborn Viaduct Power Station in London, which began operation in 1882. It was driven by Thomas Edison's company. That same year, Edison opened Pearl Street Station in Manhattan. These were not experiments, they were declarations. Electricity could be generated in one place, sent out through a network of underground wires and light up entire districts. Stations were the heart wires, the arteries of a newly electrified world. So, how did they actually work? The process was straightforward, yet powerful. Large wagons delivered coal, rail cars delivered coal. Heaps of coal arrived at the station. Inside, stokers shoveled coal by hand into the immense boiler furnaces. Burning coal boiled vast quantities of water, creating high-pressure steam. The machines may have been the stars, but it was people who made them run. The early power station was a tough place to work, a world of intense heat, deafening noise, and constant vigilance. The men who operated these plants were a special breed of skilled laborers. At the bottom of the hierarchy were the stokers, who performed the back-breaking work of feeding the furnaces. They shoveled coal for hours on end, their faces slick with sweat and blackened by soot, working in the blistering heat that radiated from the boiler doors. It was a physically demanding job that required immense stamina and a tolerance for grueling conditions. Above the stokers were the engineers, boiler tenders. These men were the custodians of the station's power. They didn't just shovel coal, they understood the intricate language of the machines. They constantly monitored a dizzying array of gauges and dials, checking steam pressure, water levels, furnace temperatures. A slight miscalculation or a moment of inattention could have catastrophic consequences. They had to know the sounds of the engines to recognize the hiss of a leaky pipe, the groan of a strained bearing. Their senses were the station's first line of defense against disaster, their expertise the glue holding the entire operation together. The success of early stations like Pearl Street sparked a chain reaction. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, coal-fired power plants began to appear in cities. Coal-fired plants began to appear in industrial towns across America and across Europe. Each new factory, each new electric streetcar line, and each new neighborhood wired for light created more demand. The initial small stations that served a few city blocks quickly became inadequate. This led to a race to build bigger, more powerful plants, often located along rivers which could provide the millions of gallons of water needed for cooling the massive steam condensers. The era of the neighborhood power plant was giving way to the era of the regional powerhouse. This rapid expansion was not without its problems. The most visible consequence was the smoke. The tall chimneys built to carry the smoke away instead became symbols of pollution. They belched thick black clouds of soot and sulfurous fumes into the air, blanketing nearby neighborhoods in a layer of grime. Another major shift was the move from direct current, favored by Edison, to alternating current, championed by innovators like Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse. AC power, however, could be stepped up to high voltages, sent over long distances with little power loss, and then stepped down for local use. Today, as we stand in the year 2025, the world of the first coal power stations feels impossibly distant. solar panels, wind turbines, and smart grids. The conversation has rightly shifted to clean energy and sustainability. Many of the old coal plants that followed the first pioneers are themselves being decommissioned, their towering smokestacks falling silent. It is easy then to look back on coal power as simply a relic of a dirtier, less enlightened time. But to do so would be to miss the point of their story, to forget the foundation upon which our entire modern world is built. The legacy of those first stations is not in the soot or the steam, but in the very idea of a centralized power network. The concept of generating power in one place and distributing it to countless homes, offices, factories, that was their gift to us. The simple circuit that lit up Edison's first lamps in Manhattan is the direct ancestor of the complex global grid that powers our lives today. We should remember the people, the forgotten pioneers who shoveled the coal, who watched the gauges, who braved the heat and the danger. So, the next time you flip a switch, perhaps take a moment, pause, and think of the long journey that electricity has taken to reach you. They built power first, so that we could have it all. Their work is done, their stations are gone, but their spark, that quiet revolutionary spark, is still with us. It lives on, a silent